Welcome back to Remove Before Race, and today we are testing what is one of the world's most desirable and fastest performance SUVs, and it is AMG's GLC63S. And I've left this for a long time. This is of course my own car. You guys have been clamoring for it on Instagram. I've now covered more than 7,000 miles in this, so there's a lot to feed back to you guys about what this car is like. But first I want to frame it logically for you to understand exactly where this is placed. Because when you look at it, your brain tricks you into thinking it's just like a GLE. Why does this car even exist? And because of the shape and the design of it, you're also thinking it's a very similar size. But I'll get onto size later. This is not the way I want you to think about the car. While it may be similar to the GLE, I want you to think of it as the closest thing that we currently have to a four-wheel drive C63. And that's why this car is so compelling, and I'll qualify that as we go along in the review. Now, of course, the GLC is based on the C-Class platform, and thus it's got an almost identical interior, and compared to the C63, it's running the same tune as that car. So we've got the 4-litre V8 biturbo, what I call AMG's best engine ever, with 503 brake horsepower, 700 Newton meters of torque. So the same figures you get in the C63S. But in this, which is now a small performance SUV. And then of course there's the looks. It's very C63 in its looks, especially compared to the recently facelifted C63 that we tested. Oh, sorry, this has been playing up recently. Let's try that again. That's better. So it does have that Panamericana grille. It's got a very aggressive front end compared to the facelift. In fact, there's more than a little AMG GTR going on this as well. And it's not just the grille. I think a lot of the lower half looks very similar to the GTR, and in fact very similar to the AMG GT 4-door as well, in that lower air intake area. So it looks very, very up to date from the front end. Now, of course, all of the top dog AMGs get this, the racing GT3 grille from the AMG GT3, what used to be called the Panamericana grille. Now it's on all of the top breed of the AMG. So every 63, the GTs, the next A45S that's coming, they're all going to have this Panamericana grille, and it's to signify immediately that this is the top dog of that range. Now, as I said, the design fools you into thinking that this is actually a much larger car. So if we look then in comparison to the GLE, you can see how much bigger the GLE in its footprint. It is a mammoth of a car compared to the much more svelte GLC. But then when you see it in person and you see how squat the stance is, how it sits on those ridiculously large 21-inch wheels with the wide tires, the wide arches, it looks like a C63S that's been injected with steroids, fed copious amounts of 100 RON fuel, and it's like a bicep that's about to pop. It just looks absolutely incredible, almost like a caricature of a normal car. I really do like the lights on the front end. They're a bit different to C63 in the way that they light up and shine, a bit thicker, and it just looks quite cool. Coming along to the side, as I said, you've got those massive 21-inch wheels. These are the same size as what we're getting on the AMG GT 4-door. So this is just going to give you a little bit of an idea of how ridiculous the proportions are on the GT 4-door as well, which I cannot wait to test and show you guys. Adding massively to the powerful presence is that huge wing on the back, and I absolutely love it. It is massive. Go big or go home, I say. That just changes the look of the GLC completely. In fact, let's see how big it is. I know what you're thinking. It's not the most scientific way in the world of measuring the size of a wing, but maybe we can make it a standard on the channel, right? So we've got here, what, 11 cups here, cluster cups. I think we could fit at least 13 along one row, and then you've got space for another bunch on here. That's how wide it is. Come close and have a look just how wide this thing is, and you will see that you've got an extra line that we could have here. It's just a massive, massive wing. I think it's at least as big as what you get in the GTS Aero Pack, GTC Aero Pack on the GT family. It really is a massive, it's as wide as my hand at least. But yeah, that's pretty impressive. The car looks so powerful in the way that it sits on its wheels, and then That's exaggerated when you put it into Sport Plus and the car drops down lower on its suspension and you physically see it happening. Now the rear end is where the illusion of a brand new AMG begins to break up, because you start getting stuff from the previous generation or maybe the current gen of AMG. So you've got the older exhaust pipes, not like the new 90mm ones we get in the updated C63S. You've also got the older style of diffuser. The lights very similar to C63S Coupé, but generally that rear end looks like it almost belongs to the C63 from 3 years ago, our current gen before the facelift. And then that error, if you like, carries on inside. So jumping inside, it's basically exactly the same as the C63S, which is great, or was great 3 years ago. Now, especially when we've just been spoilt by seeing the incredible new interior inside the C63S facelift, and less the interior, it's more about the driver zone in that car. Now, this is just looking a bit old hat, which is why you've got this strange conflict of design almost, where the front end of the car is like all the new models, but the rear and the inside is like the current ones. So it's like the poor car has been compromised because it was born at the wrong time. That being said, there's nothing particularly wrong about the current C63S interior. This all follows the same form and function. It's a really good interior. Bizarrely, we're missing the IWC clock, which really bothers me. I don't know why it's not there. The carbon looks good. Again, you don't get carbon in the door cards still on C-Class where you do on the E's. You still only get 3 ambient lighting colors because, again, this is like the current cars, so you only get white, blue, and orange. Now this is of course the S model, so it's got the AMG performance seats. I rave about these all the time because I get so many questions asking whether they're comfortable, and I've said in every review, they're really comfortable. I've done thousands of miles in this car and other cars with these seats. Don't think of them as like track seats. AMG do track seats in the AMG GTR, and as you might remember in my interview with Nico Rosberg, I keep a pillow in that car with the track seats. Those are uncomfortable. These are not. They are comfortable seats that you would expect in a Mercedes-Benz, but they look so much better. They're designed by Recaro, and they just hug you really well, especially when you're driving faster. Seating position is great. You can get really nice and low, and it feels like you're sitting in a car, especially when you hit Sport Plus and the car drops a little bit. You can only get a sunroof in this car rather than a pan roof. I'm not sure why that is, but generally it's okay. It's not going to blow you away. It's not going to shame a Macan or make the quadrifolio look old. It's just a C63 interior. But as I said, because of that, you're going to miss the Project One dials on the new car steering wheel. You're going to miss the digital display, which has been done so fantastically well in that car. You're going to miss the wider command screen with the new MBUX style UI in there. Now in the back, there's very good space. I'm 5'10", and you've got a lot of space over my head. I don't want you to come into the Coupé, especially compared to the normal SUV or the estate version, and think that you're going to lose loads of space. That's not happening. And if you look at the boot as well, there's copious amounts of space in the boot. So unless you really have loads of luggage hauling to do, your back seat passengers are going to be happy, and you're going to get more than enough luggage in the Coupé as well. So don't let that be a deciding factor. If you're still not sure, go and check one out anyway. Now, startup, as we always say, very important in an AMG. I'm not going to bother with comfort on the startup. Let's hit it into Sport Plus and turn this beast on. It has got a beautiful, beautiful, pure AMG startup, just like you get in the C63. Now I'm in Sport Plus at the moment. I'm going to go through all the modes for the revs so you can see what the car sounds like at a standstill. So let's start in comfort mode with the flaps closed. And then we open the flaps up. You hear a lot of difference when the flaps open. Then we go into Sport Plus. I'm going to skip Sport Actually, let's do sport. I always skip sport, it's unfair. With the flaps open. Not a huge amount of difference to comfort. But then you go into Sport Plus. And it sounds bloody good. And then race. I absolutely love the sound of this engine. But now I want to show you what it sounds like on the actual road test. So let's get going and I can explain to you how this car performs on the road. So we're starting with comfort with the exhaust on. Now, what is the pull towards the super SUV? Historically, it's always been about physics-defying straight line speed, where something that doesn't look like it can go that fast rearranges your senses and you're left in awe of something that's doing crazy speeds in a straight line. Now, of course, the GLC63 is very capable of doing that, stays true to the C63 family, and it's able to give you lots and lots of power in a straight line. Uses, as I said, the same 4-litre V8 as in the C63S, that same beautiful musical instrument producing 503 brake horsepower with 700 Newton meters. And even in comfort with the exhaust on, it's a wonderful musical instrument. So the car feels every bit as potent as the C63S. But now I think, let's put it into Sport Plus and let's try out a little launch control. That was quick, and the 0 to 60 on this GLC63S is 3.8 seconds. You heard that right, 3.8 seconds in a car that looks like this. That's faster than both the Macan Turbo and the Cayenne Turbo. It's as fast as the C63S Coupé. It's as fast as the AMG GTS. And this is now where you start to see the benefit of having this size of performance SUV compared to the larger ones, paired to something like the 4MATIC Plus, where you get loads of grip. And because the car, listen to that, is so much lighter, the performance is on another level compared to big SUVs. Of course, on the Nürburgring, it's one of the fastest SUVs in the world right now, perhaps beaten only by the recently released Stelvio Quadrifoglio. Can't wait to try that car. So light SUV with the 4MATIC gives you major, major performance. Now let's talk about the 4MATIC in this car, because it is 4MATIC Plus, and that Plus is very, very important. We saw it first in the AMG E63S, which you saw in my review, and what the Plus in this means, it doesn't necessarily refer to the drift mode that's in the E63, that's not in the GLC, but when you have the Plus, it means fully variable distribution of power between the front and the rear. And in non-auto journalist mumbo jumbo, that means that this feels more like a rear-wheel drive car most of the time. But when it needs the grip, it'll take even 100% of the power to the front and give you the grip you need. It's very clever. You're going to see it probably in the A35 AMG that's coming and the AMG A45 update. That'll be variable as well, but for our purposes, the car basically feels like a C63S wagon most of the time until you need more grip, and then it becomes an all-weather car as well. Now, of course, the S model has got an electronic rear slip differential as well. If you put it into sport handling mode and turn everything off, it will drift with the best of them, and that's the benefit of the 4MATIC Plus. Doesn't necessarily need the drift mode as long as you're telling the car what you want it to do. One annoying thing is that although we have the more easy to access race mode like the newer cars, there's no AMG track pace in this car, which of course you find in the new S63, E63, in the Facelift C63 we found. So you can't measure your 0 to 60 times, you can't record them, you've got none of the tracks available to you to do lap times like you have in track pace. Now, how does the car handle? Well, this car is based on, of course, the normal GLC, which is a pretty light and impressively aerodynamic car anyway. So it's a good basis for the AMG version to start. But still, your brain tricks you. When you see this car, you're thinking it's just a big SUV that's only going to be good in straight lines. And I won't blame you for thinking that. But where that may have worked in AMG's hot rod past, no longer under AMG boss Tobias Moores. He's a racer, and everything has to be capable of racing, including this car. And the first thing you notice with the GLC63S is how bloody good the steering is. Now, I'm used to with performance SUVs, you get your first apex and the one after that it's way off, but with this it's so precise. You can aim and it'll hit every apex again and again. It'll follow the line you want it to, and it's just something you're not used to in a fast SUV. Perhaps the only other thing I've driven like this is the Porsche Macan Turbo, which of course compared to the GLC63S now is pretty underpowered, so it's not really something that I'd like to compare. The agility is just ridiculous. It is so good. Wow. Now, as we saw earlier, the car drops low when it's in Sport Plus, and you see that. And of course, you've got air suspension in this car, which works really well. And the car doesn't corner too flatly, which can be an annoyance in some SUVs. I've been reading up about the Urus recently, and apparently it corners very flat, and it's not the greatest feeling in the world. But this communicates to you what the body is doing without being roly-poly. This is the great thing about cars like this GLC63S and the Stelvio Quadrifoglio, where they drive so much like a car. And that's really crucial here with the GLC63S, because you're getting so much of that C63 experience that then it really becomes a toss-up between something like this and the C63 wagon, where you're not losing much in this, but then you've got other benefits like the design and maybe different types of practicality. And of course, all-weather use thanks to the 4MATIC all-wheel drive. Or the fact that your brain just gets rearranged every time this maneuvers and moves like you just don't think it would be able to. Now, the other new thing that this car has from the newer cars is when you turn the car off and you start it up again, it always defaults to comfort, even if it's after a few seconds, which was never the case before. And it's really annoying because sometimes you just end up starting the car in comfort or the exhaust off, and it kills the experience. And then if you set your mode up in a certain way, you have to rejig into Sport Plus or individual, because it always goes back to comfort. I don't know what the reason is for doing that. Is it emissions based? But it's just an annoying part of the software. Now, speaking of software, the GLC is mated to the 9-speed box as opposed to the C63's 7-speed. Now, of course, the Facelift C63 does get the 9-speed as well. So this is a bit more similar to that in the way that it handles its gearing. But one thing I find a bit annoying is sometimes it just takes too long for the software and automatic to shift, and I kind of find myself doing it manually. It holds the revs too high. Because of that, it sounds a little bit strained. I mean, it's a perfectly great gearbox. We've been through this so many times. It will shift exactly when you want it to. Doesn't matter how many times you shift the gears up and down, it responds really well. Now, as I said, I'm in Sport Plus. Let's talk about the sound, which is so important with AMGs. Now, with this car, please guys, if you're ever gonna buy one, or you're speccing one, or dealers, if you're out there speccing one, please spec the performance exhaust. It's worth every penny. It changes the sound profile of the car completely, and it adds a layer of theatre that the standard system just doesn't have. So please, exhaust, performance exhaust, absolutely necessary. That is, of course, what this car has, and it just sounds absolutely brilliant. Now, the competition can't match it. That's unfair, actually, because I haven't driven, as I said, the Stelvio yet, but V8s are always better, aren't they, generally speaking? Upshift sounds mega. The sound profile is very current C63. Doesn't sound like the C63 facelift. nor the E. So it's a nice sound. It's one that we're really accustomed to. But that being said, it's not as loud as the C63 is. It's not as loud as the GLE either. And in fact, it's not as loud as the C63 facelift either. So it's on the lower end of the spectrum. Doesn't mean that you need to drive like a lunatic to get sound. No, that's not the case. You get plenty of sound driving slow as well within the cabin. So I'll show you what it sounds like with comfort and the exhaust flaps open. Now this is the mode I'd use the most just in daily driving. You can see even in low speeds, you get a nice V8 rumble. It's always there, you don't need to drive crazy. So as long as you have the performance exhaust, sound is going to be a big factor of why the GLC is probably the most exciting in its class, and maybe even the class above. Now I've shifted it back into comfort, and I just want to address how good this car is in terms of being a daily. Now, as I said, I've done 7,000 miles. If I look at my reset trip meter here, I've averaged 19 mpg. Well, that's not too bad considering that this is the type of car when you're driving it, you just want to drive fast pretty much all the time because it kind of rewards you in that way as well. But if you're sensible, I have found myself getting up to sort of 22, 25 mpg as well, which is again very similar to your usual C63 numbers. Now the suspension, again, it's pretty good for daily driving, bearing in mind how well this car handles and the fact that you're riding on 21-inch wheels. So I'm going to call hogwash on some of the press who've been saying it's too uncomfortable. I just don't agree. I think you have to give something to get something. And bearing in mind how well this car handles, how good it looks on the bigger wheels, in comfort, it's perfectly all right, even on these bumpy roads. It brings us back to the duality of AMGs, as we always discuss. And it's the same with the GLC, where we're in comfort now, exhaust flaps are closed, and we're just pottering along like a normal GLC. But then all you need to do is shift it back into race mode, and it's back to its old ways. Just boggles the mind. You just don't expect an SUV to behave like this car does. It's bloody brilliant. So to conclude, there's no getting away from the fact that performance SUVs are a popular niche. And even though some people say it's a useless niche, which maybe it is in the larger cars like the X5 and the GLE, in my opinion, the litmus test being that if they don't drive well, we don't have to like them. But when a crossover like this handles as well as it does, looks as good as it does, sounds so brutal, and just be so exciting to own and drive, then surely it's a niche that needs to be given a chance and needs to be appreciated and respected, especially when one can compare it viably to a C63S wagon or saloon. That's incredible. Dismiss it at your own peril, and if you underestimate it on the open road, you're going to be in trouble. I've always felt that there's a formula with expensive performance SUVs, that the more outrageous they look, the more menacing, the more intimidating they sound, the more successful they will be on the market. And I think that's part of the reason why this car is now so desirable. The GLC63S is the C63 of SUVs. It's uncompromisingly loud, it likes to shred tires, but when you need it to be, it will be the sedate Mercedes-Benz and give you year-round usage thanks to the 4MATIC. It's just a shame that it's come at a time in a transition between old and new tech, pre-facelift and newer cars. But there's no doubt in my mind that it is the most theatrical and exciting small SUV in the world. So guys, thank you so much for watching this review on the new GLC63S. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, as you always do, like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon. I'm going to do my usual.